much I'm supposed to look at you if I can look at you.
I don't think, you just... it's
This
like...
guy, I mean, my whole life was with this guy, and for the viewers of Anton Perich show, this is Susan Blond, back with you after quite a long absence. Now, this is a really exciting interview that we're going to have, we hope. This is Meatloaf, and this is Jim Steinman, the guy who writes all the songs. And I'm seeing that we are in New York for this part of it. You have heard, you cannot live in this city without having heard Meatloaf on radio, on NEW, on all the stations. On NEW, it was voted the best new artist of the year, and in the Post, it was one of the top 10, and I mean, everywhere you look. So, all of you should know about this guy, and you probably saw him at the Bottom Line, or you're going to see him at the Palladium, or probably he'll be playing...
Susan?
Yes?
We've got noise from the machine, the video machine.
That's all right.
How much?
Lots. I mean, it's like a real heavy hum.
Can we,
Okay.
well, we
Okay,
got
we're
a
ready
lot
to go
of stuff
again.
on already, right?
All set in here, babies.
What?
Shoot it. Shoot. You shot.
You shot it.
Okay, we already did that thing, so you can edit that. Okay, now, so all of you, wait, the rest of this is for the rest of the country, and I didn't finish the thing for New York. You can turn the other thing off for 1 second, because I have to end the rest of New York for 1 second, okay? I'll just say the end of New York, and then I'll say the rest, okay? Then I'll do the introduction for radio. Okay, so all of you in New York must know who Meatloaf is, and if you don't, you can come and see him at the Palladium or the Met or wherever he's going to play next, probably the Palladium on March 4th. And, and you've read a lot about him and everything, so this is the real him, and we're going to show you a movie that you're going to see what it's like to see him live, although even the greatest movie in the world, and I think it is a really great movie, is not really what it's like to see him live. Okay, now the beginning for regular radio. Okay.
You got it.
Okay, hi. This is Susan Blond, and I'm here with two of the all-time greats in my book, and I think in yours too. This is Meatloaf.
Hello, Susan.
And Jim Steinman. And I guess all you know, but if you don't, Jim Steinman's the guy who writes it all. And he plays the piano on stage, and his mind is sort of created, and it's through Meatloaf that it sort of came alive, actually. It's quite a team.
That's right. Steinman has been dead for about 5 years, and due to the fact that he's been dead and I'm still alive, it's recreated that way. Good, Susan. Good. Come on.
Okay. Now, one thing about them. All right. First, seeing them on stage. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard their record, but seeing them on stage is just about like the most. I mean, I have almost had a heart attack a few times. Now, I'm not the only one that's like this.
You're right. You're not the only one that's almost had a heart attack several times.
As a matter of fact, I was going to say, did you meet gets to this intensity that people have said, a lot of people said to me, they've said it to me, I'm sure they said it to Jim, that they think he's either going to have a heart attack or they think he's going to die. They think, because it's so intense that it's like, they say that only have they seen it before in Elvis Presley or in Janis Joplin. And I've heard that. I mean, those are the two that I've heard about. So, do you ever think of what it would be like to actually, I mean, thinking about fantasy, seeing that so much of this
die
is
on
all
stage?
about that, to die as you were like
Well,
singing
as
or
I say,
explode.
as I've been known to say before, the king died in his house. I'm going to die on stage. I figure it's good for at least 6 million records. I figure, I'll leave Steinman all my royalties, and Steinman will get rich, As they said in Record World, I'm a rock and roll mutation in a race with death.
Can't fail. Two things that never fail in show business are dying on stage and a kick line.
That's right.
Kick line's much harder for him than death.
That's right. Me and Steinman tried a kick line once.
What happened?
He was always off. He's always a beat behind. That's what happened to our vaudeville act, back in the 20s.
Yeah, what?
He was a beat behind. He wrote great material, but he was off, I mean, we should have been superstars in the 20s. But he blew it, And when I was Henry VIII, I had his head cut off. Because he was Anne Boleyn. Steinman and I have been together down through the centuries.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it's not like some people say that this is sort of like some 1950s, and a lot of it is, or 1960s growing up, and I feel a lot of that, but I think that the romance of it and all is like through the ages.
Oh, it is. I was Henry VIII. He was Anne Boleyn. I'm totally convinced of that. My road manager and I were both slaves who escaped the South. It was my plan, an escape. But then Steinman in the 20s, we had a vaudeville team. He wrote great material. We were really funny. The only reason we didn't make it, he was always a beat late. I couldn't believe it. I got so mad at him all the time. He was always a beat late. You know, so now we come back around. This time, you see, he just keeps his mouth shut. He writes the material. He arranges it. You know, he lets me take it on the stage. And it works out well that way. You know, I have to yell at him about his gloves. Let's talk. You see his gloves. Oh, you can't see because we're doing two things at once here. Let me tell the radio what we're doing. We got a video camera going here, and we're also doing a radio thing at the same time. Well, for those of you who can't see, he has on a pair of black leather motorcycle gloves which look like Darth Vader from Star Wars. And he's sitting now. Steinman always wanted to be a leader of a motorcycle gang. And this is his image which he wants to portray. His passport from 1968, he looks like a skinny leader of a motorcycle gang. And he looks like a motorcycle gang leader now, only he's not mean enough to do it. But other than that, he's very dangerous individual. Anybody who's quiet is very dangerous.
I get scared of you sometimes.
Do you really?
I do.
Well, that's valid.
And for those of you who can't see, we're all sitting here and like probably during this, seeing that the show that we're doing for TV is very like, has no censoring at all, and it's called public access. So we might do some really, really crazy things. But those of you who can't see,
that's right.
But
never
if you
know.
hear a few noises or anything,
Crazy
that's
things.
what it is.
That's right.
And
Susan is famous apparently for her public access television for taking off her clothes.
Not all of them.
Not all her clothes, only her top. And if Susan will
Only-
take off her top, so will I. Steinman will take off his gloves.
That would
It's like
make
a bad game of strip poker.
That would
And
make
it was
semi-public access.
That's right, semi-public access.
And it was always part of the plot. It was never just for the sake of it.
Right.
It's like I Love Lucy. Dick, right? Because I mean, I
Steinman are not lovers.
oh,
That's a fact. You know,
Well,
we're trying to get across. Steinman are not
see?
lovers, even though the songs are romantic.
and that they're so sexy, right? Because this
Well,
is,
look,
yeah.
Susan, the songs are more than romantic. The songs are, we can sum it up pretty easily
Yeah.
what the songs are. The songs are rock and roll in the truest sense, which means they contain certain elements that have to be in rock and roll, which have been missing from most rock and roll for the last few years because there hasn't been much rock and roll for the last few years. And they contain, for one thing, they're feverish, they contain fever,
Yeah.
they contain fantasy, and not the whimsical kind of granola fantasy of
Right.
Genesis or Yes or any of those organic groups that fly away with their own little dreams. They contain fantasies that are rooted in passions and rock and roll mythology. They contain violence and romance, and they contain violence and romance to the point where the two intersect, where you have romance that's so obsessive and desperate and urgent that it becomes violent. You have violence that's so heroic and so felt and so fantasized that it becomes romantic. So you have romance with an undertone of violence and violence with an undertone of romance. And when those two collide like two motorcycles, the motorcycle of romance, the motorcycle of violence, and they crash, then you get that chord in the backbeat of rock and roll, in the same sense that when fever collides with fantasy, or rebelliousness with fun. I mean, if you take those six elements, fever, fantasy, romance, violence, rebellion, and fun, you got rock and roll, right? And if they're all like these choppers, demolition derby, and they're all crashing into each other one after the other, then you get rock and roll, all the chords of rock and roll. And what we really try to do in the album was get all those things to collide. The romance with the violence, you can put them in any combination, the fever with the rebellion, the fun with the fever, the fantasy with the violence. And that's what I think is in it, and that's what's the strong, why it's constantly intermingling the violence with the romance. And that's what, for me, that hasn't been in rock and roll in a long time. I mean, there's no violence in Peter Frampton. There's possibly no blood in Peter Frampton. There's no fantasy in Peter Frampton. There's none of that, a lot of that stuff in Fleetwood Mac. You're not going to find fever in Fleetwood Mac. There's going to be elements of that missing for me in all of the groups in the last few years. And so what we really tried to do is get an album that had those things, and that could be ignited by all of those elements colliding with each other. And I think if there's a power in the album, it comes from those sacred elements. It's like alchemy. I mean, rock and roll takes those things and turns it into something sacred.
So I would say that then kids, or I mean any of us that listen to it, that's why you've become sort of like our idol, because we've probably been
Well, that's why they're
looking
like-
for things.
That's why they're like anthems.
Yeah, that's why it's like an anthem, because we've been looking for something to believe in and to realize.